Hello and welcome back to another episode of Porous Borders. I'm Andrew and this is episode 7, and this is the second episode of a series of 3 which will be focused on the Jogja Noise Bombing Collective, who have their annual festival coming up in about 2 weeks' time. This week my guest is Dea Karina, who is one of the newer, kind of younger members of the JNB Collective. Dea has been playing with JNB for about 2 years now, and she recently moved back to Indonesia after completing her master's degree at the London School of Economics, where she wrote about circuit bending as part of her final project. Dea is a member of the band Tujuh Kuda, which she formed in London while she was studying there. And she also has a few things going on outside of music. So we talk about all of that in the interview, and you can find links to all of her stuff in the show notes. Next week on the show, I'll be talking to Nnja Riot, who is one of the founding members of the Jogja Noise Bombing Collective, and really one of the best known musicians from the Indonesian noise scene. So hopefully between Sean and Dea and Nnja, you'll get to hear 3 fairly different perspectives of people's involvement in the Yogyakarta experimental music scene and the Noise Bombing Collective particularly. Speaking of the Jogja experimental music scene, I just want to take a quick minute to tell you about a new release that has just come out for my solo project Anchuan. At the beginning of the month, a Jogja-based net label called Mind Blasting put out a 5-way split compilation kind of thing, I guess, which included one of my tracks as well as tracks from Dissonant, Coffee Faith, and Burr, who's also known as Mahamboro. All 3 of those guys are really great and really different experimental projects from Jogja. And also on the release is a split by DJ Miko, who is primarily a DJ from Ipoh in Malaysia, but she's also just started making some work that's a bit more experimental in nature. So there's a link to that in the show notes too. It's a free download from archive.org, so please check it out if you feel so inclined. And also, if you're enjoying the show, please tell your friends, and it would really mean a lot if you could leave a rating or a short review for it on iTunes. That just really helps more people to find the show. And that's all from me for this week, so here's my interview with Dea Karina.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
From LSE.
Yes.
What were you studying?
Media and Communications.
Okay, cool. And this was your master's. What
Yes.
did you write? What did you focus on?
So I focused on circuit bending, actually. Yeah, so my dissertation was about how circuit bending acts as resistance against planned obsolescence.
Okay. Cool. I just finished editing a podcast with a friend of mine, Joel Saunders from Brisbane, who has a band that they're called Spirit Bunny, and he plays old computers like Commodore 64 and a lot of circuit bend stuff too.
Nice. Yeah.
So yeah, tell me a bit more about it. I think that band, a lot of their lyrical themes are about because of planned obsolescence.
Yeah,
junk
exactly.
That builds up and
yeah. So I took the courses at LSE that deals with technology and how we think about the future and how we think about the past as well. So in media and communications, you have the material and the symbolic, and I sort of focus on the material stuff. And we talked about climate change and the Anthropocene, and I got really interested in that. And I also play experimental music, and I've seen how my friends back home in Indonesia circuit bend stuff. And I became really interested in it, and I sort of wanted an excuse to interview my own friends.
Yeah.
So I sort of made my topic based on that.
I think that's the best kind of research, actually,
Yeah.
when you're like already interested in something and you just kind of bend whatever program you're doing to make it about that. There's like a lot in the news in the last couple of years about, like Australia sending our trash to Indonesia, and what are your thoughts on that?
That's actually the introduction.
Right.
That's in the introduction of my dissertation. So I also talked about how there's a different sentiment between the global north and the global south, and the global north sort of creates this image that they're more aware of the environment, but they also dump their waste into the global south. And there's an asymmetric power relations there. So I talked about that in my dissertation, and another one is that Indonesia has one of the biggest illegal e-waste, illegal electronic waste market. So like old Nintendos and stuff. And one of my respondents actually circuit bended because of their proximity to the illegal black market technology. So there's an interesting power relation there from the global waste chain that we talked about, and also how close we are to the accessibility of electronic discard. Just that.
It's
makes
very
sense.
interesting.
Yeah.
So I guess having a couple of years to think about that, has that affected or changed or influenced how you do your own music?
So I did the dissertation in a few months. That definitely made me think about where I come from and the privileges I have. I mean, I am Indonesian, but there are lots of other Indonesians that might be able to do better than me, but they don't have the chance to. Yes, it does. It does affect me in music, as in I try to play instruments that repurpose waste. So I have a cigar box guitar, so it's from cigar boxes. And my bandmate, Glory, from Tujuh Kuda, so I have a band in London called Tujuh Kuda. She plays with found objects. So she uses contact mics and she attaches them to the found objects and she plays with them. And our songs mostly concern with capitalism and colonialism. So she comes from New Zealand, but she is very aware of how colonialism works in the context of the Maoris. So.
Have you been there?
No, I
Okay.
have not.
It's like, because I know you grew up or spent some time in Australia when you're growing up.
Yeah, and I mean, my bandmate, she's British descent, but she tries to incorporate Maori language in her artworks. And she also has a label. She tries to release people from minorities and marginalized backgrounds. So I think that's nice. So in learning from the global waste chain and then climate change, etc., it really made me reflect on how colonialism and capitalism works as well. So that's interesting.
Yeah, Cool. So maybe let's go back up a bit because this is like one of your most recent projects, right? You were telling me before when you were in Australia growing up, that's kind of when you got interested in music or started playing. Can you tell me about that a bit?
Yeah, so I started playing music in Australia. I started playing piano, and it was very classical. So so I started playing classical piano when I was about maybe 7 years old. And then my mother used to take me to piano recitals and other classical music recitals. And then I went back to Indonesia and continued that. I took exams as well in piano, so I used to skip school to take an exam. Yeah, but
that's like an extra level of nerdiness.
Yeah, but I eventually got bored, and I stopped in the final years of my elementary school, and I just stopped playing music altogether at that time for a while, because I'm not sure why, because maybe I was afraid to fail. So my logic was, let's just not start. It's weird and unfortunate at that time. But I listened to a lot of music. I have 2 older brothers, so they were into Linkin Park, System of a Down. Yeah. Oh my God, what's that? Nightwish.
Oh, Nightwish. Okay, yeah.
They're into Nightwish.
Yeah.
Just the usual early 2000s. But I was really into Hilary Duff and Britney Spears, and just everything. I listened to everything, and I really try not to be an elitist in my taste of music, because listening to just one genre is boring, in my opinion.
Yeah, most people don't, right? Like, especially at this point in, like, with how the music distribution has changed and you have access to everything. I feel like even when I was in school in like the mid 2000s, like you had the kids who were into hip hop and then the other kids who were into AC/DC or whatever. And now, like, I guess in my experience of teaching and talking to kids at school about what they listen to, like, kids will be listening to hardcore one week and then the next week they'll be listening to Tyler, the Creator, or SoundCloud rap. SoundCloud rap. Yeah. How did you get involved with the J&B community?
So I used to, a few years ago, date, not really date, but I used to maybe see it was a high school thing. It wasn't serious, but someone in the J&B community. So he posts a lot about J&B in his social media, so I started looking into that. And then a few years later, I became a freelance journalist for Vice, and then I decided I wanted to cover them. And that's when I saw a couple of my friends circuit bending instruments. I became interested in it. And in 2018, I played my first show at Jogja Noise Bombing Festival. So I started off doing ambient stuff, and it's mostly computer music because I didn't have any instruments. I didn't have any instruments. I didn't have proper equipment, so I focused on just making do of whatever's available. And turns out that my friends appreciated the music that I produced. So they invited me to play, and it was really nice. I collaborated with Mahamboro. And at that moment, then I really enjoy this. I might as well, take this seriously. But I had to go to London and Sean Stillfox, he connected me with Glory, my bandmate, and then we jammed, and and then we created Tujuh Kuda.
Yeah, I remember that set. It was really nice. You were doing
thank you.
Mostly vocals.
Yes,
vocal
vocals.
stuff, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and the power went off in the middle, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. So I'm kind of curious. I guess in many ways I would think of Jogja and London as like not opposites, but like, you know, both cities have very strong experimental
Yes.
music scenes, right? Like there's
Yes.
Cafe Otto in London.
Yeah, I volunteered there once.
Okay.
Yeah.
And here, of course, there's so much going on too, but in some ways they're complete opposites, right? Jogja's like a very inexpensive city to live in, and London's probably one of the most expensive cities.
Yes, I agree.
And what was your experience, I guess, going to London and seeing how different it was to here?
So I think in London, it's really hard to make your own independent movement because you have the challenges of investing money in booking a venue, for example. So it's really hard to book a venue there. And London's so big. The experimental music scene is also a bit fragmented. So I would see it similar to Jakarta, maybe. Yeah, but we also see the same faces every day when you go to a noise gig. Oh, you.
Yeah.
You again, you
Yeah.
again. And that's similar to here.
Yeah.
But I think that's true in all experimental music scene. I think there's not a lot of us, so you're bound to meet similar people. But in Jogja, I think it's a lot easier to build an independent project because you don't need much money to start with. In London, when I was a student, I didn't have a lot of money, right? So I just had to make do with the music that I try to explore. Like with Tujuh Kuda, we only went to a park and jammed and then recorded with our phones. So we didn't use any modular synthesizer or anything that involves a lot of financial investment.
Sure, yeah. Did you find kind of cultural differences, I guess? Like, I'm thinking of, like, here, most things are organized through collectives and through, like, it's very much a group effort to get anything happening, right? Like, right now, you guys are working on organizing J&B, and there's a lot of people kind of playing different roles and pitching in, whereas is it like that in London, or is it more like one person curating something? Or
In my experience, it's more one person curating, and maybe they do collaborations with like 2 or 3 people who already works in an established art collective or art foundation. But I see less collective, not effort, collective bodies in London, to be honest. Yeah.
it's like, I guess, like probably physically a much bigger city too, right? So
So
people
it's quite hard
have to travel a long way to meet up sometimes. And
Exactly. Yeah.
So when you were there, you got to play quite a few like pretty interesting
Several-
shows, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. What was like your first show, and how did you get started playing out when you were there?
My first show was actually at school under my own name. There was this art show, and then, you know what, let's just try. And then I played at LSE, and then I did this vocal chorus thing, similar to what I did at GNB
Right.
2018. And people were curious, what is this about? And it's very different. So that was nice. And other venues which I played as Tujuh Kuda, mostly it was connections through Glory, because Glory knows more people there in the scene.
Right.
And in general, I think that the scene there has more women involved, and it's very open to queer, non-binary people. Whereas here, I'm not saying that it's closed, but I think culture-wise, they're just not yet familiar with those stuff.
Do you feel like here it's more that I don't know how to put this. It's kind of a sensitive thing to talk about. But do you feel like, because you don't see a lot of women on stage. There are people who are active, but is it more of just like a thing people don't do as much here, like being up front and playing on stage in front of people, or are there kind of other things going on?
Yeah, I've wondered about that. So I think there's a possibility that there's a lot of, not a lot, but there are women experimental musicians, but we just don't know them yet, because I feel like in Jogja especially, we use a lot of connections, and maybe the right person is just not connected yet. And we usually support the people that we know, and I think for people who are not within the scene, it's very hard to get in the scene.
Right.
Yeah. Or maybe, women are just not confident enough. They definitely can, but because they see a lot of representations with, exclusively men with their Euro racks and all of those cables and stuff. Well, at least I feel a bit intimidated by that, and that sort of, I don't know, I feel like there's a gap because of culture as well, because especially technical stuff, I mean, there's not a lot of women who were appointed to be like the technician for sound engineering, right? So there's that culture that makes it harder for women to learn more.
Yeah, I talked to the girls from Sarana about this a bit too, and their kind of experience was, like Sabrina was saying, the way she got started was like, she went to a gig, and like a noise gig, and all the boys had their stuff there, and she was just kind of curious, so she started playing with some of it, and then they saw that she was interested, and they were very encouraging and saying like, oh, it'd be great if we had like a female figure that people saw on stage as part of our scene here. And their experience of actually like coming and playing people have been very encouraging too. Would you say your experience is similar, or?
I think yes, people have been very encouraging, but I think the difference is that I mostly do more, not acoustic. Maybe Sarana is more technical, right? They use synthesizers and stuff, whereas I just use vocals and then probably contact mics. So I think the encouragement comes from just me performing in general and not me exploring the technical sides. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you as well about, I guess, so the first time I saw you were doing vocal stuff. The last time was at Bling Bling Combo.
Yeah.
And you were doing a lot of different things, and I was just, so you had something with water and a contact mic, and the guitar as well. Are you just kind of trying something different every show, or are you?
I think I am still exploring now. I try to make every performance different because I think that performances should be different. And I don't know, this is just a personal preference, but I view recording something, it's not, I don't know, something recorded, you just miss something. You just miss something there. And repeating the same recording, you lose the magic there. So yeah, I try, currently I'm trying different stuff. I'm also trying a different concept for JNB, but I will still use my vocals as well because that's sort of my basic stuff. Yeah. So yeah, I learned a lot from Glory as well with the contact mics.
And you're doing stuff with a cigar box guitar. How did you?
Yeah.
How did you find that instrument, and why did you choose it?
So while I was at LSC, I went to Uzbekistan as well.
Right.
As a delegation, as a delegation trip, and I brought home a dutar, which is a 2-string guitar, but the strings, I think one of them fell off or something. And you know what? I'm not gonna use this.
Yeah.
I don't know how to fix this,
Right.
and fixing stuff in London is expensive.
Yeah.
So then I went to Glory's place, and then Glory's partner Sam had the cigar box, and he told me that someone handcrafted it somewhere in the UK. So I was interested. So I played with his guitar, his cigar box guitar, and I really liked it. So yeah, I just bought it for myself. And I have no basic skills in guitar, so I just try to play with my ears and yeah.
Recently, you were one of the people who went to play in Sulawesi for JNB. Makassar. Is you an adit, right?
Yes.
Yeah. How was that?
A lot of people were responsive. I think they were just curious. But for us, I think we practiced a bit here in Jogja, but turns out that one of my connectors there stopped working.
Yeah.
So we had to, you know. I tried to play, but there weren't any sounds that came out, and Adit and then Wisnu. Wisnu is from Makassar Noise Terror. He also joined us. So both of them realized that my instruments stopped working, and then they just did some harsh noise to cover it up. So yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's the secret.
Yeah.
I brought my synthesizer called the Ford Processor. I went to a workshop in London. The workshop was led by Isn'tses, so it's Tim Drag and Lisa McKendrick. So Tim is Cementimental. He also has a project called Cementimental, and I think he's like one of the OG people in circuit bending. He used to have, in the early 2000s, I think he used to have this blog on circuit bending. So yeah, it was really nice to learn from, you know, the people that has done this for decades, probably. Yeah.
What did you take?
I took the Ford Processor, and then I took my pedal, and then that's it. That's it. It was a really simple setup.
Yeah. And how was I've never been there, so like how was I guess because it was a rock festival, right? Like it wasn't an experimental or noise or anything.
No.
So how was the crowd? Were people getting into it or confused? Or?
People stood there and tried to figure out what's happening, I think.
Yeah.
But it was interesting to see them coming from the other stages that played the music that we expect to to go to the small stage that we were in and to see the kind of people who were interested. Well, they were mostly, you know, guys wearing black, as always. I think they were just figuring things out. Because I did took his clothes off and then went on top of the table and screamed and stuff. So yeah, people were interested.
Yeah. You lived in Jakarta for a while,
Yes.
and you were working with a label there for a while, 100.000. Can you tell me a bit about that label and how you got involved working with them?
So I'm not sure if you would call it working with them. I just help out things, and currently I haven't been in touch that well compared to a few years ago.
It was mostly before you went to London, right?
Yeah, mostly before. So do you know James?
Yeah.
James Russell. Yeah. So I've talked to James since, I don't know, maybe 2017, maybe. And then I just help out with stuff. Stuff. If he needs help, I will help. So I'm also helping another label in Jakarta called Hantu Records.
Right.
So
Okay.
I've just been.
Yeah. So they're a collective as well that they organize shows sometimes as well, right?
Yeah, I think. So they're a label, and then they're also a collective, and I think they're moving towards publishing body as well.
Okay.
So with James, I also helped his friend Alap with his label Internet and Weed. A few years ago. But I think after I knew that I was going to London, I sort of maybe stopped.
Yeah. So he's actually kind of a legend in like U.S. underground music, right?
Yeah,
like he
I
was involved
heard,
in
yeah.
Dalek and done a ton of production for like rap and R&B, but also metal bands and
very
and
diverse.
super nice guy too.
You've met him.
Yeah,
You've
I
talked to
saw
him.
them. They played a bunch of shows. They did a tour, right? And I think they were here for like a week or almost a week. They did like 3 nights in a row, I think. So yeah, it was super fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was quite intimidating to work with Alap.
Kind of heard that you might have a recording on the way or in progress or.
Who did you hear that from?
Really.
Ruli invited me to do some project with him, and I think he's going to make a new label, and he's interested. So I think his approach is to get more women artists. We already have a concept. It's just when to execute that.
Right.
And it's more of a field recording, and it deals a lot with spatial elements.
Okay.
So I'll go to a certain space, and then I will record some field recordings around that space to create maybe that's too far. But just wait.
Yeah. Cool. Do you, besides J&B and that recording, do you have anything, any releases coming up, any shows that you want to talk about?
Not many people know this, but I have a post-punk band in
Okay.
Jakarta.
Oh, in Jakarta.
Yeah,
Okay.
in Jakarta. It's currently it's very low key. Like nobody really knows. At first, we wanted it to be unanimous, but then we couldn't because the people in the scene are the same. So
Yeah.
yeah, people eventually know. the band's called Maxillary, and we're trying to release a few stuff this year. And then aside from that, I'm also looking forward to collaborate with Claire for Chick. We've talked about collaborating before GNB. And then so Tujuh Kuda will release a new album also within the GNB series, the compilation.
Okay, on the label?
Yeah. And it's going to deal with the themes of colonialization.
Okay.
So.
And are you guys working on that remotely, like sending back and forth, or?
So we've jammed a couple of times. So we worked with that. So for that album specifically, it's mostly our jam sessions or our live sessions.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, but in the future, we're looking at working remotely as well, sending stuff. Other than that, I'm trying to have the discipline to create a dark wave project.
Solo project?
With someone else.
Okay.
From Jakarta.
Okay.
Too. But that depends on my discipline.
Okay.
Yeah, and I was recently appointed as a music curator for one of my friends' website. So I met her at LSE, and the website's called The Baram House. So I'll be creating playlists there as well. Yeah.
Cool. That's a lot on your plate.
I'm unemployed, so
Yeah.
it's okay.
Cool. Yeah, I think I kind of, I know we talked about it earlier, but I wanted to ask you a little bit more about some of the shows you played in London. Like, I know you played with Sly and the Family Drone for one show. How was that? How were they?
They were nice.
Yeah.
I mean, it's quite different. I think the general vibe is quite different. Are you looking to know specifics or just the general?
Yeah, I mean, how
difference?
was that was a big like a one-day festival kind of thing, right?
Yeah, Noise Shed.
Yeah,
Noise
yeah.
Shed, yeah. It was really nice. I think one of the acts, I forgot which one, I'll look it up later, used a flashlight.
Okay. Yeah.
And that's very interesting, coming from a conservative country.
Yeah.
I haven't seen anything like that. So using sex toys as instruments, and I think the general vibe there is more. If we say experimental, this is what I observe. I think it leads more to either sadism or something sexual or sci-fi.
Okay.
Whereas in Indonesia, it's more mythology,
Yeah,
spiritual, and and religious thing. So that's very interesting to see.
Yeah, that's not something you would see here. Yeah. Coming back now, do you feel like there's things you've learned from your experience being part of scenes in London that you kind of want to, I don't know, I guess want to bring back to the community here?
I think the scene should be more just queer and non-binary friendly, or women friendly, but I think it's getting there, definitely. I think it's just a general culture. It's not particularly about the scene either. Just being more open to other kinds of performances, because based on my observation, here in Jogja, it's mostly predominantly harsh noise.
Yeah.
And that's sort of like the compass where people look up to. Whereas in London, it's more open. There's a lot more variety. They also play acoustics. Some people wear costumes. There was this one act. So Kai from Toxic Chicken. He also writes for Yeah, I Know It Sucks blog.
Okay.
And he performed with Bloom de Wilde. So Bloom at that time wore a banana costume.
Okay.
And during the performance, she just threw bananas at the audience.
Okay.
Yeah, and then Kai also just ate ramen.
Okay.
Yeah, and yeah, that's interesting. You know, that's interesting to see as a performance. So, yeah, I think I would like to see more, you know, experimental stuff. One of Tujuh Kuda's performances, Glory shaved her head with an electric razor. So she put a contact mic in the electric razor, and she shaved her head bald during our performance. And that's really interesting. So I really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
I was playing guitar in the background.
Right, yeah. So just more like thinking more about the performance aspects of it as opposed to only the sound.
Yeah.
Cool. I want to just like ask you a bit about your writing as well. So I know you've done some like just kind of interesting stories for Vice, like about Jogja and about other things in Indonesia, right? You had one article about like a what do you call it? Like a part of the city that's kind of known as a bit of a rough area, and what it was like to grow up in there. Yeah.
What do you want to know?
Just maybe like I guess how you found that story, and just for I guess people listening may not have read it. So
so I talked about how it is to live with a gangster father. So I interviewed the daughter. So I think in Jogja there's a lot of stories like that, but they're just not exposed. So for example, I was lucky because she was my high school best friend.
Right.
And I thought, you know what, let me just interview my best friend. So I went to her place, I played with her cats, and it was very casual. And then, I wrote about it. I interviewed like a family friend of theirs, and we did not expect that it would blow up at all. I just got very lucky, and I think also I was at the right time because I think my friendship with the daughter is quite. We're quite close, and at some point I went through depression and stuff, and she studied psychology.
Right.
So not many people at that time knows about mental illnesses, and she, at that circle, she was the only one that responded to me and then gave me support. And I know how she loves her dad, and it's just a way to thank her as well, to write about that story. So it's a way to also strengthen our friendship. And so it started off with that. So that sort of motivated me to write about her dad. And I didn't know that people would respond to it like how it did.
There's a lot of people shared it, and a lot of people talked to you about it. She was invited to a national talk show. Wow.
Actually.
Okay.
So we both went to Jakarta, and I was in the backstage, and we just supported her. So, do you know Deddy Corbuzier?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. He's a famous Indonesian magician, but he also has a talk show. So she was in that talk show.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. And then a few people wanted her contact to create like a film, or just interview her, but she's not very into those kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah. After that, we just kept it low key and.
Yeah. And did that lead to other writing gigs?
So after that, that was my first ever article for Vice, and and in 2016 or 2017, Vice wrote like one of their best articles, and they told me they wrote that was their best article for their first year in Indonesia. And then because of that freelance writing gig, that's what made me apply for media and comms at LSE.
Okay, yeah.
So yeah, but since then I haven't really written a lot of articles, maybe just one for this LSE think tank. So
Okay.
it was quite a little bit academic, but not really. I haven't been exploring writing as much.
You should write something about circuit bending, like for a popular audience.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Do you think it would sell?
Yeah, like the guy you were talking about before who does stuff with old Nintendos and stuff. That's kind of like, I mean, it's interesting anyway, but that's kind of a juicy angle on it as well. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. Maybe I was fixated on that being my dissertation. So
Right, yeah.
Yeah, I haven't really thought about
Yeah.
making something from that. That's interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that might work.
Yeah. Cool. Is there anything we haven't covered or?
Did I tell you about the collaboration? The compilation of the appliance track and the vocal track?
Oh, yeah. You were talking about that before
Yeah.
we started recording.
Yeah, so Glory's curating this project, and so the idea is people would record sounds of their appliances, and also in a separate track do vocals, and she would put one vocal from an artist to another artist's appliance track, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited about that. So I haven't heard of anything like that before.
Is it like a spoken word thing or just like improvised voice?
Improvised. So I just hummed and did some growls.
Okay. Yeah.
I tried my best, but
Yeah.
we'll see. And at Noise, I think Tim recently just uploaded the videos from the Noise Shed where I played, where Tujuh Kuda played Sentimental, and then Isn'tses. So you can check that out on YouTube. For the Baram House, there would be another edition coming out. The theme is called Love.
Okay.
And I'm planning on doing a soundtrack instead of a playlist.
Okay.
So yeah.
Cool. I know Tujuh Kuda has a track on the Local Time compilation that Noise Bombing did. Where else can people find your music?
Oh, just on Bandcamp.
Just on Bandcamp.
Yeah,
you have a Tujuh Kuda Bandcamp page. And for people who don't speak Indonesian, what does Tujuh Kuda mean?
It's called Seven Horses.
Yeah.
There's no deep meaning, to be honest, because we just added our house numbers, and then
okay.
just something random, and then we like horses, so.
Yeah.
But somebody DM'd me that Tujuh Kuda is actually a name for a Javanese talisman.
Okay. Yeah.
So I didn't know that actually.
Yeah.
The person who DM'd me told me that, my grandmother has this talisman, and in Javanese culture, if you have a talisman, it's hard for you to pass it's hard for you to die because you sort of have this half-life. It's like what do you call it when Voldemort Horcruxes?
Okay.
Yeah. It's like a Horcrux.
Okay. Okay, so is that like I don't know, is it part of like traditional Japanese mythology, or is it
Yeah. Yeah.
Is there a story behind it, like where the 7 horses come from, or
I have no idea because we didn't think that deep, but it's just by coincidence.
Yeah.
It's the name of a talisman. A lot of people say that these talismans are passed down from your grandfather, grandmother, or you have to go to a shaman and create one.
okay.
Quote unquote, create one. Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, thanks very much for doing this interview.
No problem. Thank you.
Really looking forward to seeing you play in a couple of weeks.
Thank you. It's black conquering consciences throughout the lands, ordering lost hearts, apathetic marching bands. Indecisive, it follows a mastery decision made by masters of violent ammunition. Delicate snowfell in the virgin lands, patriots, paradise on
Thanks for
earth,
listening to this episode of Porous
silence,
Borders.
serenity.
If you're interested in exploring more underground music from the Asia-Pacific region, you can check out my YouTube channel, Concrescence Records. You can find the link to that in the show notes. If you like the podcast, please subscribe, rate, and review in the iTunes store. If you have suggestions or feedback and you want to get in touch, you can email the show at porousborders@gmail.com. You can also find me on Instagram at @ANDRWMH.